I do want to say that this is as much about communication than it is about crunching a number. And sometimes we forget that and we get all involved in the number crunching and the numbers, and we forget about who is behind the number. And we'll say it, behind every data point is a person, a student, a heartbeat. And when we can flip that and talk about that, then we're talking from the heart. And that's where we can meet. We can meet in the middle then.
Have you ever noticed that some of the best ideas come from unexpected places? Your next breakthrough may come from a leader facing similar challenges, but in a completely different sector. Welcome to Chief Influencer. I'm your host, Anthony Shop. Join us as we explore how today's successful leaders inspire, influence, and connect with others. Chief Influencer is a production of Social Driver and the Communications Board, who have teamed up to spotlight how great leaders and communicators are making their impact in the world. This episode is brought to you by the George Washington University's College of Professional Studies. With in-person and online programs, ranging from master's degrees in public relations strategy to certificate programs in digital communications, GW offers more than just the credentials to help working professionals get ahead. It prepares them to be leaders in their field. As a proud GW graduate myself, I can attest that faculty members combine academic rigor with real-world lessons that can't always be found in textbooks. Check out cps.gwu.edu for more information.
I am thrilled to introduce today's guest, Jennifer Bell Elwanger. She serves as president and CEO of the Data Quality Campaign, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to advocating for policies that make data accessible and beneficial for everyone as they navigate their educational and career paths. Jen started her career as a kindergarten and first grade teacher in the Bronx, where she worked directly with underserved students. She brought her classroom experience to the central office of the New York City Department of Education, where she served in Mayor Michael Bloomberg's administration. She then joined Baltimore City Public Schools, first as Chief Achievement and Accountability Officer, and then as the interim Chief of Staff for the Baltimore City Public Schools, leading the district through a change of administration while continuing to help it stay focused on student achievement. Jen then held positions at the U.S. Department of Education. She was the Director of Policy and Program Studies Services, and later the Acting Assistant Secretary for the Office of Planning, Evaluation, and Policy. In those roles, she led a team of researchers and policy analysts to provide analytics support and research expertise to enable department staff to make evidence-based decisions, inform policy development by analyzing data, and conduct objective reviews of department products, all with an eye to make informed decisions that benefit America's students, which is really a through line in her career. Jen, you've been called many things, from teacher to administrator, recipient of the Secretary of Education's Executive Leadership Award, and a self-proclaimed math nerd and data advocate. Today, we are thrilled to call you a chief influencer. Welcome.
Well, thank you. That seems like a big shoes to fill.
I'll tell you, we're really excited to talk to you today about this topic, because I think when we think of influence, data is an important part of it, but also data can sometimes, trip people up. How do they tell the story with data, et cetera? And so I got to just start by asking you something that trips a lot of us up. Data is or data are? Okay.
Data is all day long.
Okay.
And I know that is of great debate, but at the Data Quality Campaign, there is no debate. It is data is, because that is how normal people, regular people speak. We try and speak to the people, and we are very basic in that, and it is data is.
I love that that's because it's how regular people speak, because I can remember I took a speech class in college where they taught us certain pronunciations of words that it seems like nobody really uses. And if you use them in normal conversation, it just kind of seems weird. It's like it's correct, but it seems so weird and wrong. And, with the work that you do, you have to reach teachers and parents and the public. Mm-hmm. If you don't relate to them and connect with them, then it's really hard to achieve your mission, right?
Absolutely. If you can't explain it, talk about it over a cup of coffee, then you probably need to rethink your strategy.
100%. So let's talk. So I know you love data. This is something that you've been working with in your whole career. Not everybody loves data. So why should people care? And how do you get people to care who should, but maybe don't start, with the enthusiasm that you have?
Well, everyone deserves data to make informed decisions. Without data, you are actually just making a decision in the dark. And the data helps illuminate, highlight what, how to make a decision. What do you need to know? What are patterns? What are trends? Data is magical, but it's magical when you can use it and it's timely. And, sometimes we call data sexy because you can learn so much from having information. And for us at the Data Quality Campaign, that data means that you have data to make decisions from from everything from early learning up and through workforce. So, there are so many places, transitions where, think about a young person thinking about their next steps after high school. That is a time where you need the most data, the most information to think about, where should I go to school? What does that mean? What does it look like? Should I go directly into career? What might that look like? What are the outcomes? Without data, you are making those decisions in the dark.
So there's a lot more data available now than when you started your career, I would guess, and technology's come so far. Where are some areas that we have really great data that we can use, but then where are there some areas that maybe we still don't have the data that we need? I mean, I can just think of examples of somebody's going to invest in higher ed. Maybe it's hard for them to know what's going to give them the best ROI for their investment. For example, I don't know. Do we have good data around that? So I just love to hear your thoughts on where do we have great data and where do we need more data?
Data and data systems can always be improved, but the most important part about where we have data or where we don't have data is we have data when people are using it. I really think, very firmly about that. We could collect a whole lot of data about all sorts of things, but if you are not using it, if you can't access it, then it's not useful. It is just not useful then. So as we think about data that's, most accessible, we've seen, a lot of progress in kindergarten through 12th grade. We are getting more and more data at the post-secondary level, college, associates, community college, 4-year. And right now we are entering into workforce and early learning because all that data is so important that it's connected, that we love the term longitudinal, but that just means that we are just connecting it all together so that we have a full picture of what it means to navigate a pathway. If you are we are not in pieces, we are whole. And so our data we should be able to look at our trajectory and understand it fully from when we enter school until we go on to career.
So maybe for folks who don't know, Data Quality Campaign's been around for about 20 years.
We are just about to celebrate entering our 20th year as the Data Quality Campaign. It's very exciting for us.
Big milestone for a nonprofit to be around so long. And obviously a lot has changed over that period of time. Can you tell us the story? Why did this organization start? How has it evolved over time and under your leadership as well?
Well, at the Data Quality Campaign and in its founding, the basic premise was that people deserve data. That is our value. That has been our core value for over 20 years. And so we have been focused. Our mission is to put data in the hands, make data work for people, whether that's a student, a parent, a policymaker. So we like to say everyone from students to governors and everyone in between. And that has been our driving force, our light that is what drives us to do our work, is that everyone deserves the data that they need to make decisions. And that has been unchanged since the founding of our organization. When I joined the Data Quality Campaign, I had the honor of joining the Data Quality Campaign 7 years ago. The one thing that has changed is we were a K-12 organization. And since that time, we have now grown to that early learning through workforce. Again, going back to that point, Anthony, where we talked about that we want to see we are whole, and there is a lot more than our K-12 that helps us understand outcomes later on, where we began, how do we achieve success in career.
So maybe you can help us understand, because especially for those of us who it's been a little while since we've been in school, what kind of data is being collected? How is it being used? And, thinking of our sort of theme for chief influencer and how does data in the real world actually influence activities and outcomes?
Yeah. Data tells a story, first and foremost. And sometimes I think people get scared of data because they say, oh my gosh, that's numbers, that's math. I don't want to do that. But think about data telling a story about success, telling a story about where students might need additional supports, where we need to put resources, which students are succeeding, which students are struggling. When we can start to flip those numbers into a story, that's when we have collected the right data and we are using it in the right way. So, we think about educational data in lots of different ways. To your question, those are things like attendance, just very simply attendance, student assessment results. There are other things that we think about, is like the teacher workforce becomes part of the data. High school graduation rates, discipline, suspension, all of those things create a picture. Indicators, early warning indicators. How are students succeeding? Student grades. Any information can help us think about what supports young people need as they are in school.
So I saw something, you all had an announcement a little while back about your sort of vision around state level longitudinal data, if I'm remembering that right. Is that about making sure, I just can imagine with lots of different schools, lots of different states, is it about making sure people collect data in the same way, package it in the same way so that you can, compare apples to apples? Is that what that's about?
Yeah, we believe that the state is the primary driver who can really support these data systems for all of the schools and for the rest of the state, whether that's post-secondary workforce. We really think that that's a place where statewide longitudinal data system can reside, because you can use all sorts of different sector data to build those complete pictures of young people. But the most important thing about that, and why our vision is so powerful, is there has been a lot of collecting in the day. People sometimes feel like, oh my gosh, how are they using my data? They're collecting it. People don't use data they don't trust. So our vision is that data is not just collected in this, warehouse or something, but it is actually being turned around to answer questions that both policymakers have, students might have about, where will I go to school? What will be a good fit for me? Policymakers are asking questions of these longitudinal data systems like, what programs have been successful? Where can we put our resources when resources are tight? What is our return on investments? And then parents are looking at the data that comes out of these systems and saying, is my school successful? If my child goes on to a certain career, what kind of outcomes will they be gainfully employed? Employed, apologies. So those are the types of data. Those are really the questions. We always say that the data quality campaign, start with your questions. So it's not just about collecting lots of data, but again, it goes back to that storytelling, Anthony, right? It's like, what do the data say? What can it say? And then that's when it becomes magical, when you're talking about what people need.
So let's go back in your career a little bit. You're a kindergarten teacher. Mm-hmm. You're teaching kids, I'm thinking like the ABCs probably in kindergarten. And then you find yourself working for the city of New York. You're working, when Michael Bloomberg is the mayor, and you end up in a role where you are taking data and you're creating graphs and charts to try to explain to policymakers and others what's going on. Talk a little bit about that transition. And I guess I'm wondering if, obviously, storytelling and simplifying is so important. If your experience teaching young kids, might have prepared you to decipher important data for policymakers. That might have been a good skill that you learned. If you could get a kindergarten to understand something, maybe you
Yes.
can reach somebody else.
You know what? I think you're right. It is very true. Not only do I have very good handwriting from my years as a kindergarten teacher, but I have learned to be able to explain and share information in a way that makes sense, and also adjusting to the audience that you're speaking with. And that goes back to that coffee conversation. If we can talk over coffee, then we've got something here. And it's really easy. And it was a very interesting job. Even my husband will always say, I married a kindergarten teacher, and now here you are.
Yeah,
So I think sometimes his head is spinning about all of these developments. But it's what I went to school for in educational psychology, was to study how people learned, and that meant how to build tests and how to assess knowledge. And so that's how I rolled into the role of assessment and accountability at the New York City schools. But that breaking data down into the humanity of it is what became the secret sauce all of these years. And I think that's why I was able to speak to mayors and chancellors and families all alike, because I was able to, take the cast off of just it being a bunch of numbers on a table, but making those numbers come to life. That's why, whether I was in the Baltimore City Schools, the U.S. Department of Education, and of course at the Data Quality Campaign, that has been the through thread, is that people deserve data. Stories make it make sense. And knowing your audience is incredibly important in all of this.
Yeah, and I think you obviously have this sort of unique combination of skills. Many of us who are storytellers may not see ourselves as being so great at math. And some people who are really great at math may not always be the best storytellers. Mm-hmm. And you're, a math whiz who also has figured out how to tell stories, maybe honing that a bit through teaching.
But not always easy though, Anthony, because being a woman in data is, you do have to break through some doors to do that. So sometimes we see women as a teacher or storyteller and leave at least when I was learning all of these statistics, is like, leave that to the men. So, you have to be doubly competent, but also wanting to, sometimes people can mistake, talking in a knowing your audience, forgetting that, oh, wait a second, you're not the mathematician or that you thought you could be. So it's a very, very interesting dynamic. But being a woman in data, I'm very proud to be one. And hopefully we've made strides since I started out. But it was definitely interesting to be the lead in the New York City schools around data, and needing to break through those doors and get people to be confident in the work that you do each day.
Yeah, I'd love to talk a little bit more about that kind of contradiction that you just brought up, because what I heard, let me see if I kind of heard this right, but if you're a great storyteller, you can bring this data to life, you can bring the numbers to life, and that is so effective when you're trying to get a message out to a senior policymaker or to the public or to a teacher. But you're saying, being a woman in data, people are bringing these preconceived notions, these stereotypes, that they're thinking that maybe you're not the math data whiz, because I'm picturing the old, movies where it's like a NASA bank of data people and it's all the little white shirts and thin ties and guys in glasses, right? So they have these stereotypes in their head. And if you tell that great simplistic story with the data, you're saying you've had experiences where they may have questioned whether you were the math nerd that we know you are. And so, maybe you didn't, they kind of question it. So how did you balance that? Because that sounds tricky. And it sounds like maybe you've learned some lessons about adapting to different audiences that could be helpful for others to hear.
All right. Well, let me tell you a little secret about how to navigate all of this. It wasn't always easy. I certainly had people checking my math in the early days to make sure that I was doing it right. But the funny part was when leaders were asking around about, is this right or wrong? Folks would say, well, I don't know. You better ask Jen. So I think that says a lot. But it took quite a bit of thick skin, and it has served me well. But thick skin for me in all of this didn't mean that I needed to be mean, angry, any of those things. It actually helped me to double down and to lead like a lady. And I feel that in my bones that I didn't need to scream from the rooftops that I know math and I can do this, but it was in my ladylike way of just showing up, of constantly being firm in the data, in what it was saying. And sometimes people don't know how to do that kind of math, and it meant taking a step back and having patience and sharing with people how to do certain things like weighted averages. They might seem simple, but that's it, they are not if you've never been exposed to that. So it's recognizing, again, it's knowing your audience, right? I'm always going to go back to knowing your audience and being able to tell a story. And that it just because that's part of it, right? It was like, okay, so you're not familiar with this. Let me show you. And that's the way that the data quality campaign, that's how we talk about the work that we do. We do nothing alone. We're going to bring you in. We're going to bring you along and not just say, I've had it with you. You want to check my math? Well, then go ahead. That kind of thing.
Well, and you mentioned, adapting to different audiences, but something I'm hearing from you is that no matter who the audience is, whether it's mathematicians or policymakers or kindergartners, using kindness and patience, that is sort of universal across all those audiences.
That's right. That's right. And honestly, when you're thinking about data and math, it can be very frustrating. So you must have patience to make sure that you are getting it right.
Yeah. Luckily, we have so many more tools for lay people like, us now that, I say us, I mean myself, with spreadsheets and all kinds of stuff that we don't have to know everything as well.
True. You don't need your fingers you always will need your fingers and your toes to do math, but you can have a couple of extra tools also.
I don't need the graphing calculator that I had to use back in high school. Thank goodness. I haven't had to use that for a long time. That was always tricky. Although I think they still use the same one for some reason. So somebody's making a lot of money off selling the same exact thing for a long time.
Well, we always want people who can visualize data and make it come to life. That's, again, that part of the story is you can see it. So I guess those graphing calculators do come in handy.
Yeah, if you know how to use it, I guess.
That's right. But we have better tools than that now.
What else did you learn? I just wonder, Mayor Michael Bloomberg, pretty well-known, well-respected person, has a very unique leadership style. I know he set up his team and, in the mayor's office in a bullpen and was very open to transparency. Just love to hear if you have any experiences from working with him or how he showed up to influence. I mean, what was that like being part of the team?
I love that time. I mean, I've been very fortunate. I have worked for presidents and mayors and state chiefs, and this. I mean, I just have been so fortunate in my career and working with Chancellor Klein and Mayor Bloomberg was really just. It was an exciting time in New York City, and just learned incredible amount, but just the focus, right? Like, don't take your eye off the prize. We were there to get work done about students, and we to give them the best education possible, and we were going to drive it until we could, until we couldn't anymore. And I just think that stayed with me. And also, one of the things that Mayor Bloomberg was incredibly wonderful about was just asking questions, and also Chancellor Klein. And I, as frustrating as that could have been, because sometimes you take that and you say, oh, well, they don't trust you, or they are, maybe they don't believe you or anything like that. But really, those questions made me the leader that I am today, because I have been able to interrogate the information, and which is how I received it. And it really is important to be able to ask questions. And that is where Mayor Bloomberg was just so phenomenal, was just getting at the questions, and also being really human and personable. That was the bullpen. That's why we worked in bullpens. And I've always loved that, because you get much more done when you see everyone instead of behind doors.
Having worked for a leader who asked a lot of questions and sort of created that culture, do you find, I imagine there's some environments where folks might be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah.
And then if they don't ask questions, it's hard for you to give them the right answers. And I think that comes down to influence, right? I mean, it's hard to influence somebody if they don't have a chance to get the information they need. So I wonder if there's anything you could share about that, about maybe creating that culture where people can ask questions, and what that's like, because that's something I think any leader, no matter what size of organization they're with, could probably benefit from.
Yeah, as a leader, one of my most important roles is a mentor, and being in that mentorship. And so one of the things that I have always done throughout my opportunities in leadership, and now, is that I meet with every team member one-on-one, every 4 to 6 weeks or so. And that, to me, is where we both, it's all relationship building. Again, this is all about relationships. All of our work is always about relationships and developing them, and having those one-on-one opportunities with staff enables them to get to know me on a more personal level, and vice versa. And because you just work better when you know someone, right? We can understand their learning styles, their work styles, but also, like, what's going on in their life. So those are very important, to just get that, but then also to hear what questions they have, or how they're experiencing the work. What does this look like? And sometimes, as a leader, you only get your information from a few places. And by meeting with the entire team, you just get that whole breadth of what is happening, and you can keep your finger on the pulse. And I do think that Chancellor Klein and Mayor Bloomberg, through that bullpen, they were able to see and talk with everybody. And I have brought that with me in all of the roles that I have been in, is that accessibility. I think it's just really important, because you get more work done when people trust each other, they believe in each other, and they're comfortable with one another, to be able to ask questions, and also say, like, hey, I don't think this is working. When you have that trusted relationship, you're able to do that.
Yeah, you remind me, when we interviewed Steve Taylor, the CEO of the Arthritis Foundation, he said one of the first things he did when he became CEO was he moved his office to be right off the main lobby, and would keep the door open so people could go by and see him. And that, what you're describing as accessibility, and even somebody, like Michael Bloomberg, that's something that he's really demonstrated and valued. And it's a really powerful leadership style to influence others.
That's right.
You talked about mentoring. Were there any mentors that were really important to you? Other ones that we haven't talked about?
Oh, I would say, again, have been so fortunate. I mean, I've worked for President Obama, and been able to work with Secretary Duncan and Secretary King, and Dr. Andres Alonso. The list goes on. I've been so fortunate. But I would say, And I will probably get a couple of brownie points around the holiday table. But truly, my mother-in-law has been a wonderful mentor to me, and the reason is that she was a principal in the New York City schools,
Oh,
and she had been a principal for 30 years by the time she had retired, and she was not just loved; she was beloved, and what I learned from her was a relationships matter. They matter among families, matter among your team, and just watching her in action and take that leadership, and also to deal with the hard stuff. If I thought teaching was hard, once I left that and went on to these other roles, it's like, how do you navigate the hard stuff, keep the relationship, be a woman in these leadership roles, and being able to show yourself and your personality and your personal background, and also show up. And so she was just a tremendous she's still a tremendous mentor to me, but during that time was just I really just drank it all in.
that's really cool. That's really cool to hear
Mhm.
that. Some of what you've talked about with the relationships, but then also data, you're sort of reminding me of a theme we've heard from some other leaders too, which is that if you want to truly influence others, you have to speak to the head and you have to speak to the heart. And I know, coming from a data standpoint, that's obviously about speaking to the head, but you've been also talking about the value of relationships and making those authentic connections and storytelling. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about how you do that, particularly when you're coming at it from the data standpoint. You might work with others in the data field that need coaching on speaking to the heart, and vice versa. There might be folks who really believe what they believe around education, but they have a great story. But maybe they kind of need to bolster that with some data. So I don't know. I just love to hear
Yeah.
your thoughts on that sort of balance.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go take you way back. But before I do that, I do want to say that this is as much about communication than it is about crunching a number.
Mm.
And sometimes we forget that, and we get all involved in the number crunching and the numbers, and we forget about who is behind the number. And we'll say it, behind every data point is a person, a student, a heartbeat. And when we can flip that and talk about that, then we're talking from the heart. And that's where we can meet in the middle then. And when I was in the New York City schools, one of the first things that I did was help bring these reports called the grow reports to families of fourth grade students. And why this was particularly important was, this was back when there's under No Child Left Behind. We had just started to do state testing at grades 4 and 8, and parents were worried. What does this mean? What will it look like? What if the results are bad? What should I do? How should I do it? And so one of my colleagues, David Coleman, came to the New York City schools with this great idea. Let's build a report that speaks to families about how they did on their reports. I loved it because it was pretty, it was packaged, it did speak to the heart and to the mind at the same time, and identified how not only like just the score on the test, because that's all we had been doing before, but like broke it down a little bit more in and helped parents say, like, well, your child struggled with fractions, or she had trouble doing some of the comprehension on the reading section, or struggled with some vocabulary. And that starts to bring those numbers to life again, right? And so now there's an entry point. And that has been always, no matter, I was releasing, high school graduation rates. I worked on the college scorecard at the US Department of Education, or at the data quality campaign. All of the things we do is say, okay, where can people enter into this story about data. And so that is why at the Data Quality Campaign now, when we talk about that big vision for use and access, we talk about it with people in mind. We talk about the student who is about to enter into college. We talk about the parent that is looking for early childcare for their child. We're thinking about we talk about the policymaker or the researcher. So grounding it in people, because that's how folks can enter and experience the data.
Yeah, and I love that example of the Grow report, because if you just said your kid's at the bottom end of the scale, that would be it's information, but it might be discouraging information versus, this is where that gap is, and here, gives them an action plan of.
And that word action is, again, we talk about this always at the Data Quality Campaign, and it has been one of my most important things wherever I was, Baltimore City, everything. People need data that they can act on, because it should try and change behavior. Once you understand, you make meaning of it, you can say, oh, well, with this, I could do something. I can change something. I can go after something. But if it's just numbers on a page, then it's very difficult to make meaning of it and then to take action. And if it's not timely, also is really important. If you're looking at, data from 10 years ago, you might find it interesting, but could you act on that? So really making data actionable and timely are key to getting behavior changed.
Do most of the folks in that world, the data world, do they get that it needs to be actionable, or do you find are some folks just academic about? I think, in like science, you have some people who are like working on a specific cure, but then sometimes, you have things where it's just scientific inquiry and it's not necessarily for any specific purpose. And I don't know what it's like in your sort of world of education data, but how much in your role do you have to be a champion, an advocate for folks to say, hey, we need to make sure this data is actionable. This is not just an academic pursuit. This is for the real world.
Yeah, that is one of our cries, is to make data timely and actionable. It's the complaint. People, we do national polling every year at the Data Quality Campaign. And no matter whom we speak with, whether that's a parent, a principal, another school leader, an early childhood administrator, a college administrator, everyone will say they don't have the data that they need. And they'll also say that the data that they have is either not actionable always, or doesn't come in time for action to happen. And so I think that there's a collective we can do better on this. And I do sometimes that comes down to capacity, and we always have to think about how do we support those who are making data happen, right? How do we build their capacity? But also, we need to be building in this urgency that people need this information now. I think that urgency in education is so critical in all aspects of it. But right, if we're looking at chronic absence or other things, that data doesn't help us a year from now. We need that data. We need that data right away, so that we can help the student, we can help the school, we can get supports to them. So again, timely information is just critical.
Yeah. Well, yeah, when you talk about something like absentee, I would imagine since COVID, that is probably
top of mind.
Top of mind, probably a data point that we're looking at a little differently than we used to. And certainly the way you measure it would be different if you're looking at a period of time that maybe somebody was logging in from home. I want to just ask you, as we close, you've worked so much in education, you've been a teacher yourself. Is there an educator who's most influenced you?
Well, there have been, again, a great many, but I will also go way back and talk about my 4th grade math teacher, Miss Heidelberg. Don't you love the name? It's amazing.
I love that name.
And she was my 4th grade teacher. And, in the 4th grade, she teaches everything. But the way she taught math was so magical. And she gave me confidence because I don't think I liked math that much going into fourth grade, if I remember correctly. But I saw a woman in math, loving math, and giving me confidence in getting, that I could get the problem right. And that was good.
That's really cool. It's fun, those teachers that they stick with you so long and,
Do.
make such a big
And I
impact.
haven't, thank you, Anthony. I have not thought about Miss Heidelberg in a minute. And thank you for bringing up a very just tender memory.
Oh, you're welcome. I was just messaging on Facebook with my sixth grade English teacher, Mrs. Prager, who we read The Hobbit, and she really built confidence. I think that's a really great
That's
thing that
right.
you said there about the importance of building confidence. That
Mm-hmm.
we could read a big
And,
thick book
and,
like.
and confidence it serves us well. And even in all of the roles that I've worked in, that was one of the things was I would say, am I confident to do this? What are there new skills that I want to learn, and how do I learn those new skills? Has brought me just, that's the confidence factor, right? Is like confident that I don't need to know everything
Yeah.
to do a good job also, right? I can learn those, and I can depend on others to get to do the work too, and put others in front of the work when it's their turn to shine. I don't That's confidence, right? That's leadership,
Mhm.
is that we do better together always, right? It is not about one, it is about the many. We are stronger together.
I love that. What a great way to close. Today, I think we all are convinced that you love data, and we understand a little bit more why, because behind every data point is a person or a student, a heartbeat. And data really is a representation of relationships. And it can help us take action to improve people's lives and make such a big difference. And I just love the story of how you started out as a teacher and took that expertise so that you could help teach policymakers how to make the best decisions. And you've certainly done that in so many incredible roles in New York City, Baltimore, U.S. Department of Education, and now as leader of the data quality campaign. So Jen, thank you so much for being with us today on Chief
Great.
Influencer and sharing your story. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Anthony. I appreciate you spending time with me this afternoon.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Chief Influencer, a production of Social Driver and the Communications Board. If you know a leader who should be featured as a Chief Influencer, please nominate them at chiefinfluencer.org. For show notes and more, visit us at chiefinfluencer.org or follow Chief Influencer on LinkedIn. Until next time.